Hi, good morning everyone. Long time no see. Last Saturday, we did not have any recording because on that day itself, we had 3-4 events, and then after that, 2 or 3 days later, we had an event in Hong Kong where I had to fly to Hong Kong to do a face-to-face event. So it was pretty hectic, and that was the reason why we did not have any recording. Nevertheless, it's good to see all of you again. And for those of you who missed our YouTube video, well, I'm almost certain that you'll find today's final part to be shocking and very interesting and very educational. For today, we'll be talking about how it's part of our special series on how America became great. This will be the final part. And for those, if you like to know more, please give us your comments. Share with us your comments, and we will share with you all the research that I've been doing for many, many years. So we all know, most of us will know, that Britain is famous for conquering the whole world through a policies, through a strategy of divide and rule. For those of us in Malaysia, we had the very first taste of it when Britain came, conquered Malaya at that time, and divided the Malays from the Chinese, from the Indians, so that they could actually rule Malaya at that time. But how does America do it? How does America become great? Well, I think this is where the video for this week becomes very interesting. Let's maybe go straight into what I have to share with you. Quite a fair bit of what I'm going to say comes from the book by Michael Pembroke called Play by the Rules, and it is a short story of America's leadership from around the end of Second World War up to the COVID pandemic. Michael Pembroke is an Australian, and he was a Supreme Court judge in Australia before he retired. He has also written another book called The Korean War, a very, very fascinating book that I would encourage all of you to read to understand the Korean War from a very pretty objective perspective. So let's talk about today's topic. Now, in 1945, the original 50 member states of the United Nations were almost all allies of the United States or supporters of the United States. Right? Don't forget, in 1945, Germany was defeated, Japan was defeated, Russia won, but Russia was devastated in that Second World War. It was estimated that 28 million Russians were killed. That's actually partly why Germany lost the Second World War. And then China was, of course, still in civil war. So the founding members, the original 50 member states of the United Nations, were all part of the United States Empire, the American Empire. The reorganization of the international financial system in 1944 in Bretton Woods. This was at the UN Monetary and Financial Conference in Bretton Woods in America, legitimized America as the world's economic superpower. And this resulted in the establishment of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, later known as the World Bank. In both of these international so-called multilateral organizations, the United States was given very dominant board representation and special veto powers over major decisions by these two extremely important international organizations. The founding of the United Nations and the reform of the international financial system were not altruistic. Although a lot of times the narrative from the West is that it is very generous, very altruistic of the United States. Even the Marshall Plan that America launched for Europe was also constantly portrayed as altruistic. All these were actually intended to facilitate the creation of a post-World War II order that would work better for the United States, work better for a single empire. Not only did the United States play a crucial role in writing the new rules for the international community, but the United States almost immediately began breaking the rules. You know, very often we hear in the Western narrative that you got to follow the rules-based order, the international rule-based order, and so on and so forth. Now, those international rules were basically created by a single superpower at that time, United States. And then here we know that the United States almost immediately started to break them. By 1954, at the U.S. National Security Council meeting, headed by President Eisenhower, a senior U.S. cabinet member would make the following statement without disagreement, protest, or objection from anyone in the room. Whatever we may choose to say in public about ideas and idealism among ourselves, we've got to be a great deal more practical and materialistic. We should stop talking so much about democracy and support dictatorships of the right if their policies are pro-American. So if you know the charter in the founding of the United Nations, it was very liberal. It was for a better civilization, for a better world community. It is not about policies which are for promoting self-interest. According to the Washington Post, there were 72 attempts by the United States to change governments in other countries from 1947 to 1989. According to the historian Monica Duffy Toff, from 1992 to 2017, when the United States was basically the only superpower, the number of American military interventions of all types jumped up by 400%. Many of these operations were, of course, covert and have been and continue to be conducted by the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. It is perhaps, according to the book by Michael Pembroke, it is perhaps ironic that until this day, the CIA has no legislative authority to conduct covert activity. That means it has no legal standing to do all the deceitful activities that it has been conducting. The accountability that applies to conventional military operations does not apply to the covert activities of the CIA, which are required by the NSC to be so planned and executed that any U.S. government responsibility for them is not evident to unauthorized persons and that if they are uncovered, if they are discovered, the US government can possibly disclaim any responsibility for them. From the outset, the CIA conducted its activities as if the United States were in a permanent state of war, except that it was actually peacetime globally. Elections were interfered with, governments were overthrown, democratic leaders were assassinated, military intrusions took place in foreign states without the approval of the United Nations. The principle of collective security enshrined in the UN Charter was totally defied. Respect for the sovereignty of foreign nations was overlooked. The rules of international law were ignored. All these activities were authorized at the highest level in the United States by the President of the United States, the National Security Advisors, and the directors of CIA. Some of the clearest and most damning examples include Iran in 1953, Guatemala in 1954, Vietnam in 1963, Chile in 1973, Iraq in 2003, and the list goes on. It's a very long list. Whatever else there were, they were not victories for democracy or rules-based order. One former CIA director who was under Trump version 1, Mike Pompeo, actually revealed to a Texas University audience in 2019. He said, "We lied, we cheated, we stole." That is the CIA. And this Association for Responsible Dissent, people who disagree with what the CIA is doing, basically warn about the consequences and denounce what America is doing, because US covert operations killed, wounded, terrorized millions of people whose countries were not at war with the United States, did not possess the capabilities to do physical hurt to the United States, who themselves bore the United States no ill will, nor care greatly about communism or capitalism. The first major operation in a foreign country by the CIA was a covert campaign to influence the 1948 Italian general elections. Imagine Italy, a Western democracy. That was the first country that the CIA conducted its covert campaign. This paradoxical situation was that only 3 years after the UN Charter was that unlawful means should be used by the United States to prevent a lawful result in a separate sovereign country. Iran, 1953, its Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh was not a communist. In fact, Time magazine named Mossadegh Man of the Year in January 1952, choosing him instead of Churchill, MacArthur, Truman, or Eisenhower. Yet in August 1953, the United States chose to overthrow Mossadegh's democratically elected government of Iran. The CIA-led operation known as Operation Ajax was authorized by Dulles, the US State Secretary, and approved by US President Eisenhower. On 19 August 1953, the day chosen for the coup, thousands of demonstrators who were paid by the CIA rampaged through the streets demanding Mossadegh's resignation. Military and police units whose commandos President Roosevelt had bribed and joined in the demonstration. That changed. 1953, this coup changed the entire history of Iran. Iran would have been completely different had this CIA-led coup d'etat not occurred, because after that, it allowed the autocratic Shah, the Shah of Iran, who was backed by the CIA, backed by America, to take over Iran. And of course, after that, there was a popular revolt against the Shah because he was so corrupted, and the ordinary people in Iran was not benefiting from the riches, the oil riches of Iran. And therefore, the history of Iran has changed forever since 1953. I don't think America cares. Guatemala, 1954. Less than a year after the overthrow of Mossadegh, the CIA did the same thing with the democratic government of Guatemala. Vietnam, 1963. At the Geneva Conference in 1954, which was conducted to solve the differences arising from the Korean War and the French colonial war in Indochina, the United States actually opposed the unification of Vietnam. The United States wanted to perpetuate the permanent division of South Vietnam and North Vietnam, North Korea and South Korea. Imagine, North Korea would have been, had all this not happened, North Korea and South Korea would be one country like Vietnam now. Secretary of State Foster Dulles attended the conference but did not negotiate in good faith. When asked before the conference whether he would meet with the Chinese representative Zhou Enlai, he replied icily, "Not unless our automobiles collided." When Zhou Enlai approached Dulles and held out his hand to shake his hand, Dulles turned his back and walked away. Washington was opposed to the very idea of elections in Vietnam, whether it was agreed at the Geneva Conference or not. Chile, 1973, the White House and the CIA were secretly plotting the overthrow of another democratically elected government. This time it was Chile. And then after the coup, Chile was ruled by General Augusto Pinochet for 17 years, and his dictatorship was supported by America and the CIA. This was a period of 17 years where the Chileans suffered a lot of brutalities, a lot of human rights abuses. But America doesn't care about human rights abuses. America only wanted a leader that was under the thumb control of the CIA and America. Iraq, 2003, right? The same thing happened. You look at Iran, Guatemala, I'm showing you a few other countries where this threat of the communist Russia and so on were actually non-existent, all very tenuous. But every one of America's intervention was a repudiation of the principles and precepts that were central to the rule-based order to which the United States professed allegiance to which the United Nations Charter was all about.
Are you tired of doing investment research on stock markets? Want to spend time on your hobbies or go out with your friends instead? Introducing iCapital, where you can get independent, objective, and comprehensive investment advice on the go. Available in English and Mandarin and can be accessed via app, website, and print copy. We provide thorough, first-hand research-based findings on listed companies, economies, and stock markets, and clear perspective of how markets interact and how they influence investments, as well as provide Malaysian and global stock recommendations, stock portfolios with outstanding performance to follow. Subscribe now to iCapital for stock news. From only 49 ringgit a year, start investing like a fund manager. Subscribe now at www.icapital.biz.
These leaders of Mossadegh, Diam, Allende, Arbenz were not communists. None of them were under the influence of Moscow. And all of them were genuinely committed to social reform of their country. And inevitably, the military junta and the dictators that replaced them was a lot more deadly than these left-wing people who had challenged the existing order. In pursuit of its objectives, of its selfish interests, the United States created and prolonged political instability, generated social unrest, and caused the deaths of millions of innocent citizens. This was long before the invasion of Iraq. This was just shortly after September, the event, 9/11, when the Twin Towers was bombed in New York. 10 days after 9/11, America was already planning to go to war with Iraq. Secretary of Defense at that time, Donald Rumsfeld, wrote in his notes in 27 November 2001, and the notes contain the following: building momentum for regime change. How to start? Saddam moves against the Kurds in the north, ? US discovers Saddam's connection to September 11 attack or to anthrax attack. Dispute over weapons of mass destruction inspections. Start now thinking about inspection demands. Decapitation of Iraqi government. This was years before the invasion of Iraq. They were already planning it. There was never a case of weapons of mass destruction. Hans Blix, the Swedish diplomat who was in charge of inspecting whether Iraq had any weapons of mass destruction, said that the US went into Iraq to create democracy, superficially, hypocritically, to create democracy in Iraq, but they found no weapons of mass destruction, and the United States instead created anarchy in Iraq. Until now, Iraq is still, you may say Saddam Hussein is a brutal dictator, but at least the Iraqis had stability, had food to eat, decent houses to live in. Iraq is a mess. This is already 20 years after Iraq's invasion. What does America do? When the Washington Post conducted an investigation many years ago, the US National Security Agency, one of the 17 America's intelligence agency, intercepted and stored 1.7 billion emails, phone calls, and communications every day. America loves, the Western media loves, the Western politicians love to tell you, you cannot have TikTok in America because China, the Chinese government will want all your data and so on and so forth. But American intelligence agency, only one of them, the NSA, stored, intercepted 1.7 billion emails, phone calls, and communications every day for 365 days. And you're worried about TikTok. Access to many hundreds of ultra-secret programs known as Special Access Programs or SAP is so severely limited that few, if any, people have a complete understanding of the SAP. James Clapper, the person on the left-hand side, a former director of national intelligence, told an investigation team that there's only one entity in the entire universe that has visibility on all the SAPs, and that one entity is God. Since 1994, the United States Senate has not ratified a single UN convention or treaty that has come before the US Senate. Some of the important topics, some important subjects on which the United States has placed herself outside of this include the rights of children, discrimination against women, human rights, climate and the environment, law of the sea, missile reduction, and the arms trade. Hundreds of nations have ratified the UN treaties and conventions on all these subjects, but America will not participate in them, or will only do so with very heavy qualifications and modifications. In the 21st century America, international scrutiny of America's conduct or that of American armed forces and citizens has become unacceptable. The modern United States has drawn a very firm red line against any form of international accountability. That is scary, right? Today is just Saturday, 2 days before Trump version 2 comes in. I wonder what the world would be like, whether America would still be immune from any form of international accountability. On trade, tariffs and WTO, America is undermining WTO. It has done that with the International Criminal Court. In the opinion of Shiro Armstrong, the director of East Asian Bureau of Economic Research at the Australian National University, he said the era of a rules-based trade is ending. The United States has gone from underwriting the rules for the past 70 years to becoming its biggest threat. As we know, right? Trump version 2, Trump version 1 is Mr. Tariff. He's going to impose tariff on literally every country in the world. He wants to take over Greenland. He wants to take over Panama Canal. He wants Canada to be the 51st state of the United States. Who knows, he might say, Japan, why don't you be the 52nd state of the United States? On Summit, Arms and Climate, right? America has been withdrawing from them. Under Trump, they withdrew from the Paris Agreement on climate change. Of course, after that, Biden joined in. But then, now Trump is coming in again. And the famous one, the one that's extremely important, is the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, where America has never signed. America talks about freedom of navigation in the South China Sea, but yet America hypocritically refuses to sign the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. If you are interested, let me know. I can share with you 9 reasons, 9 solid, selfish, economic reasons why America refuses to sign the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. And it has nothing to do with freedom of navigation. I can guarantee you that. The American century has been a disaster, and it continues to be a disaster. The greatest long-term threat to America is the United States itself, undeterred by rules and procedures, driven only by the inconstant winds of its own self-interest. What, according to Donald Tusk, not Trump, Donald Tusk, who is the ex-president of the European Council, what worries me most is the fact that the rules-based international order, which was set up after Second World War, is being challenged not by the usual suspect, but by its main architect and guarantor, the United States of America. If you can see the table on your right side, which country do you think is the greatest threat to peace in the world today? America, United States, top number 1.
We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportion. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
President Marcos Jr. has been very close to America. In fact, under President Marcos Jr., he allowed America to open additional 4 or 5 military bases and allow Philippines to be another, I do not know, 53rd state of the United States. But if you dig deeper into Philippines' history, and unfortunately most of the Filipinos do not know enough about their own history, Philippines was betrayed by the United States of America 130 odd years ago. There was a Philippine Revolution against Spain, because before that, Philippines was under Spain. In 1896, led by Andre Bonifacio and Emilio Aguinaldo, they fought for independence for Philippines from Spain. And unfortunately, in 1897, Aguinaldo was exiled to Hong Kong with promises of reforms from Spain. Then there was a Spanish-American War in 1898. The United States declared war on Spain because the United States wanted to gain control of the Philippines. And Aguinaldo returned from exile after receiving assurances of American support. Aguinaldo hoped for American support in his fight for the Philippines' independence. But in the Treaty of Paris in 1898, America purchased Philippines from Spain for $20 million, betraying the Filipinos' fight for independence. Basically, the Philippine freedom fighters were betrayed for America's selfish interests. This book, A People's History of the United States, written by an American historian, Howard Zinn, is another must-buy book. He has passed away, but he writes on starting from the time when Christopher Columbus came. Very enlightening disclosure sharing of the people's history of the United States. The beginning is the conquest, slavery, and death. When we read the history books given to children in the United States, it all starts with a heroic adventure. There is no bloodshed. There is this discovery by Christopher Columbus. And Christopher Columbus, there's a celebration in America called Columbus Day, which some of the states, some of the natives in America refuse, like for example Hawaii, refused to celebrate it as a Columbus Day holiday. So this is the narrative that the history textbooks in the United States will tell you, right? That America was discovered by Christopher Columbus. There's a Harvard professor who said that is basically, he wrote, he's a famous Harvard historian, he wrote one line, says that it was a genocide. But what Morrison does is something else. He will mention this truth very quickly and goes on to other things more important to him. Outright lying or quiet omission takes the risk of discovery, which when made might arouse the reader to rebel against the writer, right? So what Morrison does is to state the facts quickly and then to bury this one simple line that Columbus committed genocide, bury that in a mass of other information so that you tell the readers that, look, yes, murder did take place, but it's not important. You know, it should weigh, this genocide by Christopher Columbus should weigh very little in our final judgments. So it should affect very little what America does in the world. You see, the underlying assumption in America is that a nation that competes with the United States for power, influence, or economic preeminence is automatically an enemy, an adversary. And this enemy threatens America's security and prosperity. Now you know, look at the Republicans and the Democrat politicians. There is a deep-seated belief in Washington and the Western media that China is a civilizational threat to America, right? And many commentators would like condemn China for being authoritarian, communist, illiberal. The list goes on and on and on and on. But in contrast, China is completely different in reality. Farid Zakaria, a famous CNN broadcaster, wrote, China has not gone to war since 1979. China has not used lethal military force abroad since 1988. Nor has China funded or supported proxies or armed insurgents anywhere in the world since the early 1980s. This record of non-intervention is unique among the world's great powers. All the other permanent members of the UN Security Council have used force many times in many places over the last few decades. A list, of course, led by the United States of America. That's how America became great. That's how America became a great empire. But truth of the matter is this. This is a very interesting article written many years ago. It's called The End of Hypocrisy. Few US officials think of the ability to act hypocritically as a key strategic resource. Indeed, one of the reasons American hypocrisy is so effective is that it stems from sincerity. Most American politicians do not recognize just how two-faced their country is. Two-faced. America is a hypocritical hegemon. Hypocrisy is central to America's soft power, its ability to get other countries to accept the legitimacy of its action. Yet few Americans, the American public, appreciate the role of hypocrisy. The ease with which the United States has been able to act inconsistently with international rules-based order has bred complacency among its politicians. Since few countries ever point out the nakedness of US hypocrisy, and since those that do can usually be ignored, like say for example, if Malaysia were to complain, who cares? American politicians have become desensitized to their country's double standards. So here you go. This is an article in the Foreign Policy magazine, a very respected American political journal, and it talks about hypocrisy in American foreign policy. So this will continue because the situation globally is still more or less the same, right? The Western media, the Western politicians still do not call out the hypocrisy among the American politicians. And countries in South America, in Africa, in Asia, most of them are too powerless to do anything. So while Great Britain became great because of her divide and rule policy, the secret to America's greatness is hypocrisy, double standards. Do what I tell you to do, but don't do what I do. United Nations Charter was basically formulated by United States, and yet America has failed to comply with most of the principles contained in the UN Charter. So we have a few more days before the 47th President of America gets into power. I don't really know what will happen because Trump himself doesn't know what he's going to do. Trump version 1 wanted to ban TikTok. Trump version 2, apparently he's invited the CEO, the chief executive of TikTok, Mr. Chew, to attend his inauguration. And Trump has said that he loves TikTok because in the recent election, through TikTok, Trump was able to reach out to millions of young Americans. So there you go. So same TikTok, in one instance, is a threat to national security. In another instance, he loves TikTok. The hypocrisy continues. So this is my final part on how America became great. If you'd like to find out more, let me know. Like I already explained many times, in fact, all the things that I've pointed out here are based on journals, books, things that can be verified by anyone. I have not invented any of these facts. And if you notice, all my sources are written in English, and many of them come from the West. As I have explained before, I can't read Chinese and I cannot speak Chinese. So I can not be more objective than what I already am. I think you find that what we have said in our YouTube videos, all of them have this common factor in them, objectivity. You notice we don't have advertisements and so on. We don't have hidden interests. We have no conflicts of interest. So please share whatever you like, comment and like it. And if you have not subscribed to Capital Dynamics YouTube channel, please do so. And if you like to look at investment investment matters on a regular basis, subscribe to www.icapital.biz. That is our investment advisory website. So with that, I hope you have a good weekend. And let's see, 20th January 2025, what happens to the United States and what happens to the rest of the world. Have a good weekend.